This is the first video of the series and we're gonna create a template with Nucleus. Nucleus is a library from Audio Imperia. It costs $4.49, but you can get a discount as a cinematic composing student. It has almost everything that you would need. It has both individual instruments type of patches like flute or violins one section, and also ensemble type of patches like strings, brass, woods. It also includes a few orchestral percussion instruments as well as choir and a little bit of sound design. The only thing that it doesn't have is a piano, which is okay. I'm sure you will have a piano library. But with this is a great starting point type of library. It's similar to Albion 1, obviously a different sound. Maybe this one is a little bit more flexible because it has a few more instruments if you compare it to Albion 1. But without further ado, let's get started. This is the template that we're going to be creating. What you see here, these tracks are the tracks that we are going to be creating now. Up here, these tracks come from my personal template. And usually when I create a template for my students, I somehow like to have my original template, and this is not my entire template, this is just a part of my template, but I like to have it up there just to compare the type of sound that I'm creating with the new library, to sort of have like a reference sound. But anyway, I'm gonna close them now, and what I'll do is I'll create the first couple of tracks maybe from scratch, from nothing, and you'll see how I add the track, how I add the instrument contact in this case, how I load the patch, how I tweak a few things, and I'll talk about this process. Now, because that process is going to be repeated over and over and over again for at least 30 or 40 tracks, it makes no sense for you to see me creating the track, loading contact, etc. repeatedly. So what I've done, as I said, is I've already created the template. And once I've explained how to create the first couple of tracks, I'll load the rest of the template, and then I will explain track by track what we've got and how I configured. And hopefully this will speed up this video a little bit and it won't be too long of a video. So that's how it's going to go. And before we get started, a couple more things. Number one, for those that are familiar with my template, and the typical way to go when you're creating a big template is you're gonna use multi-timbral contacts. And I'm not gonna go in depth explaining that concept, more on that on the SBO course. But if you see me not using multi-timbral contact here, if you see me not using rack tracks in Cubase, it's because this is a very simple template and I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. So we are going to be using instrument tracks. Literally, the way we're gonna do this, we're gonna right click at instrument track. That track includes both sort of like the MIDI track and the aux return track in just one track. We will load contact, add track, boom, ready to go. We will load the instrument here and we are ready to go. This is going to simplify the process a lot. It's going to give us more flexibility, given that this is a small template. We can move this track around, no problem. And yes, we are using one contact instance per instrument in a way. Now, if we were talking about a 1, 2, 3, 400 tracks template or 1,000 tracks template, then we need to start optimizing all this. And having 400 contact instances, every instance takes a little bit of CPU processing. And if instead of having 400 contact instances, we can divide that count by 16, like contact will allow us to load 16 or up to 64 patches in here, it's going to lower the number of contact instances, let's say from 400 to 25. So for this template, we are not going to use multi-timbral type of contacts. Second thing, Nucleus is a very cool library, but there's something that I need to explain you before we start. And maybe you're already familiar, so if you are, just skip this part. But we're gonna talk about this knob here. And so what this gives us is the ability to change where the sample starts playing. But let's say that we've got this staccato sample, right? And what we have here is a sample that has this fast attack and then this fast decay. Goes like this, and this would be sort of like the wave form, right? Let's say this is loudness and this is time. So we've got a few milliseconds here, right? Maybe 10 milliseconds till we reach the maximum amplitude of this waveform. Now, those 10 milliseconds, one, they're going to be noticeable, and two, this is a common issue with sample libraries. We can either preserve those 10 milliseconds and then the sample is gonna sound natural. Or we can cut the sample literally, and then when we hit the key, we're gonna have that feeling of the note starting right when we hit the note. So there are some libraries that will leave more of this beginning of the sample, and there will be other libraries that will cut a little bit, and there were some libraries that would be very aggressive with this, which is cool because when you quantize, everything is very much aligned, but you lose a little bit of that natural type of sound. Now what Nucleus gives us is the ability to decide where the play of that sample starts. Now if we bring this here, it's giving us 250 milliseconds ahead. So, and the closer that we move it here, at some point it's 0 milliseconds and it cuts a little bit of the sample. And that's basically what this does. And sometimes it'll make more sense to have it configured like this. Sometimes we will need a little bit more of time. And sometimes we can map this to a MIDI fader and control how tight or loose we want the start of this sample to be. Now to access this knob, you need to be in the advanced mode of this library, right? So this is the second thing, and it's pretty much related to just this Nucleus library. The third thing is reverb inside contact. In my template, I never activate the template that comes pre-built in a specific library for many reasons. But the most important one being, if I have to deliver my tracks to a mixing engineer, I prefer having a series of plugins that I can mute in just one click of a button, rather than having to go one by one and having to deactivate the reverb inside each instrument. But in this case, because we want to create a template that's going to sound good out of the box, and because we want to optimize this as much as possible, and most of the times the reverb built in the instrument itself, it's gonna be optimized for that library and for contact, and it's gonna use less resources, less CPU power. We're gonna use the built-in reverb for some of the tracks. If you decided to use this template, you can always turn them off and use your own reverbs later on. And finally, you'll see that sometimes I have two of the same track, like for example for the piano here, or for the strings here. And I'll do this sometimes because sometimes you'll need two of the same instrument, even with ensemble patches. And we will see some specific examples later on. And finally, when I'm done creating this template, below this video, you can download it. The only thing that you're gonna need is obviously the library. And the way that I'm going to share this with you is you're gonna see 3 folders, and inside each folder, you can see the contact patch. The only thing that you need to do is create 36 instrument tracks, load contact, and then one by one in contact, just drag this instrument from here into contact, and that will load that specific patch with my settings. When you've loaded those 36 instrument tracks with contact in it and loaded each one of the patches or the multi-patches, then you should have a template that sounds exactly like this one. Alright, so this is the end of this video. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things before we actually get started building the template. That's gonna be the next one. See you there.